Hi, and welcome to my new tutorial. Today, I want to show you how to deploy a Next.JS frontend with AWS. 1 month ago, I would have done it a different way. I would have created my Next.js frontend, then I would have committed it to GitHub, I would have created a GitHub action, and I would have written this GitHub action in a way that it deploys to AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, whatever. As I found out in my latest project, I can do it all with AWS. I can commit my code to AWS CodeCommit and then use AWS Amplify in order to get my front end automatically built and deployed with a click of a mouse button. And this is very cool. You don't need to understand how GitHub Action, for example, works. You can do it all automatically. So all you need for this tutorial is a PC running Visual Studio Code, and of course you need an AWS account. Let's get started. What you see here is the AWS console with nothing in it. So first of all, let's activate AWS CodeCommit. Click on search and type CodeCommit. Then you click on CodeCommit and you need to create a repository. A repository is the place where you will put your code. So now you need to give a repository name. Let's simply call it Next.js-demo. And then we click on create. The next thing we have to do is to open this repository in Visual Studio Code. So first of all, we need the clone URL. So we click on clone HTTPS, and this will copy the URL to the repository into our clipboard. And here we click on clone Git repository. And then we paste the URL into the field on the top. Now we need to select a folder. I just take a folder as it is, but you can put it everywhere you want. So I click on select as repository destination. Now we need to give our AWS credentials. Now you click on OK, and we get the answer that we are not allowed to access this repository. My problem is that I am logged in as a root user, and this is not recommended. I need to fix this by creating a separate user who will commit the code. In order to do this, I search for user and then I click on feature users. And now I create a user. First of all, I have to give a username, which is discotheque-github. Then I click next. Now I have to give the user the privilege to access CodeCommit. I can click on attach policies directly, which is the fastest way for our tutorial. And I search for CodeCommit. And I select AWS CodeCommit full access. I click on next and then I click create user. Now that I've created the user, I have to give them credentials. So I click on the username, then I select security credentials. Here I search for HTTPS Git credentials for AWS CodeCommit and click on generate credentials. Now that these credentials have been created, I can use them. I go back to Visual Studio, click on clone Git repository, paste the URL again, select the folder, and now the Git credential manager opens. I copy the username. I also copy the password. And then I click on OK. Now the cloning was successful and I can open the clone directory. Now it's time to create our Next.js application. Let's open a terminal. So click on terminal, new terminal. And then you can type npx create next app. npx is a part of Node.js, so I assume that you already have Node.js installed on your computer. After a very long waiting time, I'm asked to proceed. I type yes. Now I have to name my project. I call it Next.js-demo. Would I like to use TypeScript? Yes. ESLint? Yes. Tailwind, CSS, no. Source directory, yes. Use the app router, yes. Customize default import alias, no. You might ask me, well, why don't you use Tailwind or whatever? I would say the default settings are exactly how I would use them. Okay, my application has been created. As you can see, there's a folder inside a folder, which I personally don't like. So what I do now, I move all the files to the main folder. And after this, I can delete the Next.js demo folder. Now let's try to start the application. I type npm run dev. And now I control click on the localhost link. And as you can see, our Next.js application is running. Now let's start deploying everything with AWS Amplify. I am back on my AWS console and I search for Amplify. And I select AWS Amplify. Okay, let's create a new app. You can see that AWS Amplify works together with GitHub, Bitbucket, CodeCommit, GitLab, and so on. We will select CodeCommit. We click on Next. Now I click on Select a repository and you see my repository is already appearing here. When I try to select a branch, you can see that the branch is not selectable. The answer is quite simple. We need to commit our application to CodeCommit. So I go back to Visual Studio Code. I click on Source Control and I type basic first check-in. I click on More Actions and say Commit and Push. Now you can see that magically master branch is appearing. Some people might argue that master should be renamed to main, but for this tutorial I leave it like it is. And on the next page, the real fancy magic happened. AWS automatically recognizes Next.js as a framework. It suggests using npm run build. AWS also creates a service account for us, which executes our Next.js application. And since Next.js is running in a Node.js server, we need an image. We have Amazon Linux 2023 as a default option. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it works. Let's click on Next. And after some account checking, I can click on Save and Deploy, and the rocket is starting. Now the magic goes on. AWS Amplify is checking out the code from our repository. It's building it, and then it's deploying it. It is even generating an URL. Okay, here we go. After a few minutes, our application is deployed. We can click on this link and our Next.js application is starting. That's really magic.